Hey everybody, welcome to Startups and Code. Today I am going to be talking with Shawn Johnson down in Atlanta, and we will be chatting up about startups and some other random topics that we like to talk about because that's who we are. All right, and welcome Shawn.
Hey guys.
Hey, there we go.
Yep.
Anyway, that was fun. That was my little intro transition, and
Yep.
I
Yep.
want to make sure we are streaming. Camera is live. All audio. Say something, Shawn. Let's make sure audio is good.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
We are good.
We're good.
Cool. Um, so yeah, I sent out a topic that we're going to talk about pitfalls and startups and crazy things like that we've both encountered uh,
Mm-hmm.
time over time. But I have a feeling we're going to talk about other random things as they come up because that's just who we are and that's
Yep.
reality.
Yep.
Um, but let's start staying on topic and let's see where it
All right.
takes
Cool.
us. So, like, what's one of the biggest pitfalls that you constantly see when you work with startups or entrepreneurs or even boot camp kids?
I think so. I'm trying to keep it succinct. Not having court vision.
What does
Are
that
you able?
mean? No,
Right.
explain.
Yeah. I'll explain. So if you play
Oh,
basketball,
I was about to
or,
say basketball.
yep.
I'm caught up.
Yep.
Yep, go ahead.
Yep. So there's a phenomenon where when you have great athletes, great players, and smart players. Smart players can be great players, but they're not always the same. And a lot of times you'll see players who have a number of attributes, but one of the attributes will probably always be like court vision. They're able to see the full court. They're able to understand all the many things going on in the court, so they'll be able to make plays that that other people can't make because they can't see everything or can't determine what's going on. And applying it to the startup world and entrepreneurs in general, you can't adapt to a flow you can't see, right?
That's
So
fair.
yeah, and I personally have seen this where you, it's hard to explain to someone what's wrong when they can't. You're looking at the same picture, but the nuances and the discolorations are evident to you, and they're not evident to the person. And sometimes I used to think that you either got it or you don't, but in actuality, these are disciplines and these things are muscles that need to be exercised and developed over time. You need to be able to see beyond what's in front of you to understand what is being presented and how they're all interconnected and how it all affects everything around you. A lot of entrepreneurs will want to build something, but not have any realistic understanding of how the thing they are going to build affects their customer. I'll start forward, right? Like customer centric. If you don't understand or you don't have the core vision to understand what is in the day in the life of your customer, you're really going to have a hard time building a product for them.
Do
So
you
I'll stop
do you have like a concrete example that comes to mind?
there. I feel like
Without
I have.
using names, without throwing somebody
Yeah.
under the
Okay.
bus.
So no name dropping. Um, I work on a lot of educational apps, and I recently was having some product road mapping sessions with a customer who wanted to build an education platform, and I I want to be kind and say I must have misunderstood where they were in their journey, but I was like really taken aback by how little they knew about educational techniques for like that would be applicable to that platform. And you and I think a lot of people, a lot of founders, you either you're a perfectionist and you need to stop, or you everything is an MVP, and you need to understand that something in this is a revelation that's recent to me, is that an MVP still means that one thing has to work. It's not like a bunch of half broken toys in a box.
Right. No, MVP, minimal viable product for those who are learning, um, has to have one end to end scenario, right? It has to have your happy path,
Yep.
whatever that may be. But if it doesn't have a single don't worry, you're going to miss edge cases. Like if you want 100% code coverage, give it to your clients, they'll find it for you.
Yep.
But no, if you have, they're like, oh well, we have this piece over here, and then we've added this other shiny thing over here, and then there's this third thing that we're gonna stick onto it, and we're gonna call that an MVP.
Yeah.
And none of them are working together.
No, I mean, and also I kind of like the way you said coverage because covered, but you're not trying to cover everything. And a lot of the founders I run into, this is a big challenge, right? Because it has to do everything or it's useless.
Right. That's the other side that you were talking about in regards to the
Yep.
perfectionism
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, analysis paralysis kind of concept of,
Mm-hmm.
oh wait, you need to have these pixels, or that's two hex codes off of the color that I need it to be. I believe you. I believe that is a true statement, and I think your product will still work.
Yes.
And that negotiating that sometimes is really challenging. Of they're
Yep.
like, oh, but this like here's a great example of that, and I'll use a color that I know is patented, and I was like, okay, in that case, it's legit. So Tiffany's has their color, and that color is literally a patented color. So
Mm-hmm.
if you mess that up, then yeah, you should no longer work at that company,
Mm-hmm.
because it is that critical. But there are other times that people think they are Tiffany's and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to realize that up front of like, hey, you know what? Let's get something out the door and see what sticks.
Yep. And again, I think a lot of times they get ahead of their customer.
Right. And everyone thinks they're the next Steve Jobs, and they're not. And I want to bring up the Steve Jobs story because everyone's like, well, Steve Jobs built the iPod. I was like, yes, he did. And he even, like, one of his quotes, or I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it was, uh, the customers, if you ask what the customers wants, they'll just want a faster horse. And that was Henry Ford,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And Steve Jobs is like, the customer doesn't even know what they want. I'm going to let them know what they need. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Steve Jobs got away with that. Henry Ford got away with it because no one knew what a car was when he did that. But if you're building a website or you're building even a web application, I'll be generous. 2% of them are probably in that category. The other 98%
Mm-hmm.
aren't. And they need to realize, hey, let's just see what we get. If we're generating a million MRR, then yay for you, right? But are you going to be the next $1 trillion company? Probably not. And that's okay. And I think that is a hard thing for a lot of people to swallow.
I love it when people quote like these visionaries, but they don't have. For one, they just quote it's a slice, right? That moment in time, right?
Exactly.
It's like the quote is meant to imply people don't know what they want until you show it to them, which is true, said by a person who has a history and the discipline. They don't. No one ever quotes his time in India or his time doing calligraphy, which are all of the underpinnings that led him to be the way he is when it comes to design, which
Right.
influences all of these other decisions. They just go to the top and go, well, I'm doing no. You didn't do the work. You're just being arbitrary at this point. You just whatever the flow is, you're going the opposite direction because you think that is cool, and it is cool to be, you know, a rebel. But Can you build a company from that?
Is there a business plan behind that rebellion?
Exactly.
Right. No, that's a because everyone wants to be the like nowadays the term disruptor is actually a good thing, and everyone's like, I want to be a disruptor. I want to
Hmm.
disrupt this industry. Well, okay, great. How well do you know the industry you're trying to disrupt?
That that part. Let me find my hand here. That part.
That. Right. And
you
it's
know,
like, oh,
it's hard. Doing research and product discovery and customer discovery and doing all of the unsexy things is hard.
right.
And the realization that the thing that you thought you were building may not be the thing that your customers need is also hard.
I have a great example because a friend of mine, we were working on this medical coding application, and
Mm-hmm.
we were because his dad was a doctor, and we talked about, oh well, they all have these different codes, and all these hospitals are like so behind the times in technology and blah blah blah, and we're like, oh well, we're smart, we can solve this. And I don't know, I was probably maybe 30 at the time,
Mm-hmm.
28, something like that. Anyway, and he and I were just playing with this idea, and what we realized, we're like, oh, this is great. We can actually do this. And then we went and talked to an actual doctor, and oh no, every hospital has their own code, they have their own systems, they will never consolidate because the insurance company is actually what drives that, and then if the insurance company doesn't actually approve it, then they'll never get paid. So the truth is, by doing what you're doing will improve efficiency, but the doctors won't get paid, so no one will ever be okay with that. It's like,
Exactly.
because basically we were trying to disrupt technically three industries:
Mm-hmm.
finance, the medical industry, and the insurance industry all at once. And it was too big of a pill to swallow at that time. And even in a it's called a consortium. So even in a single hospital consortium, so basically you'll have uh, one hospital group that will actually maintain five different hospitals. Like up here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in New York, so we have the New York Presbyterian, and they will actually have like five different hospitals of New York Presbyterian, and
Mm-hmm.
inside those five hospitals, they will have different codes to identify things in their own family of hospitals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I had a realization of like that where when I called it Lux AI. It was
mhm.
like Carfax for luxury goods, right? I think I might have even said this to you. You don't buy the thing, you buy the
By the
person.
person, right?
So like when you try with the rampancy of piracy and this, everything is a fake or some variant, it's really hard. But one of the early lessons was this would be super simple for the people who make the products to fix if they cared to. Like the reason why that all this counterfeiting exists because it serves a purpose. I mean, the counterfeit market for some of these luxury items is almost maybe not as big, but big enough that a lot of people have a vested interest in seeing it exist.
Yeah,
And
I
we're
mean,
talking billions. We're talking,
it's intent, right?
yeah,
If there's a market for it, people will sell it.
yeah, it's billions. It's a like if the fashion industry is a let's just pick one segment of the fashion industry, like men's fashion, right? Luxury men's fashion. If that's a $10 billion industry, then the counterfeit market for that same industry is probably a $3 billion. It's too big to
Right.
the and you just have to understand that problems are problems for a reason. So when you pick a problem you're going to solve, you need to understand the reason.
Right. And understand the industry you're potentially going to affect.
Yeah. I mean, you could be a disruptor and be like, I don't care. I'm going to solve, counterfeiting for luxury goods. But at the end of the day, if everyone doesn't buy in, it's going to be an uphill climb.
Right. Because some people are actually okay with the non-authentic brand.
Yes.
They
Well, what really gets interesting is that not all the time, but in some very easily documented cases, the counterfeit brand is produced in the same factory as The counterfeit brand is produced in the same factory as the normal brand, and
Wow.
it's opening up a whole nasty can of worms with what is authentic.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah, especially with so this kind of, I think I was aware of this with sneakers. If you, I don't assume everyone knows how to make a sneaker. I have a clothing brand and we have sneakers. You know, everything's expensive. Like every size of a shoe is a separate mold, and those molds can cost up to 12 grand to produce. So every size shoe per style, before you make a single shoe, can 10 size 1 through 10 will cost you 120 grand.
Just to make so
The
10
mold
sizes,
to
the
make the
mold for the
full
10 size. And you haven't even bought the material to actually make the shoe.
no. Now, things have changed and the prices have come down, but when you consider these high prices for the material to make a shoe, and you see a counterfeit with the exact same sole, you just have to understand that these counterfeiters are not buying separate things to make things. They're using some
The
of the same.
existing molds.
Yeah,
Wow. That's crazy.
yeah.
All right. So wow, that's insane. So back on startups.
Mm-hmm.
Um there's some other pitfalls that I know I've encountered in regards to, like, let's just talk about scaling.
Yeah.
And so everyone, you get your first customer, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to do everything for this first customer and make them the happiest customer ever," and then word of mouth will grow, right? Let's say that happens and now
Mhm.
they're dealing with scale. What are some of the scaling concerns that you've encountered in regards to a startup?
I think one of the biggest issues that I'm currently dealing with is, what you mentioned is what we call delighting our customer, right? So you go out of your way to delight a customer, but how can you delight 1,000 customers, 100,000 customers? If you, so I see some people creating onboarding customers in a way that just won't scale. Now, I think the theory is right, right? Like you gain customers by every delightful interaction. So software isn't easy because it's cheap for us to replicate. Once we get it, it's cheap for us to replicate. Like if you know who this customer is or who this group of customers are, and you can delight them with your execution, it's just a matter of rinse and repeat. But if there are people in between your process, people don't do rinse and repeat very well. And
Right. And if your scaling is people based and not software based, then you're going to have a challenge.
yes, and
No.
what is particularly challenging is if you just set an expectation that cannot be scaled.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's, I think everyone wants to have, like, would you rather have one customer paying $1,000 or 1,000 customers paying $1? I was like, obviously, I would love the 1,000 customers paying the dollar. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because if I lose one, I'm not out of a business.
Exactly. Exactly.
um, there was another topic that kind of went aligned with that. And as you start building a product, uh, one of the pitfalls that I've seen in a few startups that actually have since no longer exist is they're failing to pivot, basically seeing, oh wait, if we go this direction we'll have an entire new revenue stream in regards to X, Y, and Z, and they have blinders on of where they're headed, and they're like, no, 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 we have to do this, we have to do this, and they have people literally asking, hey, can we pay for this over here? No, 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 no. Well, we can't do that yet. We have to. Wait, you have people willing to pay?
Yeah,
Um,
you're not even reaching your own level of you know getting money in the door, and you have people asking for something. I mean, it's definitely a big mistake to not recognize what your customers are like. What again, I think I kind of said this before. It's like it's not what you think they want; it's what they're actually asking for, and your job is to respond to it. Um, I was having, I think this phenomena happens for a couple different reasons. One, it takes a lot of courage to stand up and go, "Hey, I'm going to do a thing, and I'm going to follow this path, and I'm going to complete it." Right? Let's just acknowledge that that takes a lot of courage. And then, once you start doing it, you're committed to this path. But what I would argue, in my old self would argue, like this version that has had a lot more experience would argue, don't don't commit to the result, commit to the formula. Like I
Explain
have this,
that.
yeah. So I have this conversation a lot. Like we're in Techstars, and I repeat this to my founder a lot. If you have a math formula and you know what the formula is and you know what to expect on the other side of that equation, right? You're just standing there waiting for the result, right? And if the result is what you think it is good. And the result is not, it's bad. But I argue that learn the formula and then you can apply the formula to places that you didn't consider that you haven't even considered yet, right? Like, it shows up so often in this last couple weeks. It's like, well, we thought this until that result no longer matched what we were looking for, but the the formula is actually still right if you consider all the elements. Like maybe it's not the customer, either it is the customer, but it's not the thing that you're selling them, or it's not the customer and there's another customer that wants that thing. There's nothing wrong with your formula. Your math is like your formula is correct. Your results are not.
Right. And there are some times where you might have an amazing product and you're targeting the wrong audience, period.
Yeah.
And, or you might have an audience who is point blank telling you what they want and you're ignoring them and still building the product they don't want. It's like,
I used to have a manager, and when you work in these large corporate consulting companies, somebody's always waxing philosophically. But one time I was listening to him. I mean, I liked him, but this was the moment that I started to respect him. Like he sat me down in his room and he said, you know, when we go into I'm summarizing. Basically, when you go into customers, because as a consultant, you're paid to answer. So you assume any conversation you have is related to something that you know. So you go in, hey, I know how to make apps, I know how to make games, I know how to do this, and you start pitching them on stuff. Let me help you with any number of things that I know. And he said that's the absolute wrong way to do it. He said, sit down, listen, shut up, listen, and ask him what his problem is. And he will tell you. And as a solo practitioner, I've used that to great effect. As a consultant, I took the message that he delivered, and you know, I remember one time I was trying to close a deal, and it was going on and on and on for reasons that had nothing to do with me. So, I just at one time I was talking to a customer, he was kind of giving me the brush off, and I just looked at him. I was like, "Are you okay? Like, is there something going on that I could help you with?" And he just looked at me like no one had ever asked him what the actual problem is. We closed the deal that day.
yeah. Because if you're providing a solution to a problem that they know exists, then it's easy to sell that.
Yeah.
And like honestly, from a sales standpoint, and going back to the whole Wolf of Wall Street, sell me this pen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the pen. It's
Yeah.
about why do they need it?
Yeah.
Like how important is that pen to them?
So
And
that just opens a whole
anybody
nother.
can get a pen,
Yeah.
but
But
this
can you get the
pen,
pen? Which can you get the pen when you need it? Can
right?
the value be transferred?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Um, Here's another topic that just popped in my head, and I was like, okay, we got to at least cover this. So I want to talk about AI and startups.
Okay.
And you're like, okay, some of the stuff that I've seen recently, and I've actually done some stuff recently. I I'll just use the example I did last Saturday. I created a Chrome extension in about an hour from zero to published in under an hour. Um,
Crazy.
yeah, it was crazy with Claude. And I use Claude AI, and everyone knows about ChatGPT. For those who don't know about Claude AI, go check it out. It's pretty amazing. Huge
Really.
fan. It's
Yeah.
really amazing. But there's ChatGPT, there's Claude AI, there's Midjourney for the Gen AI, there's Leonardo AI. There's probably 5,000 different AI companies out there.
So let me add to it because we talked last week. We're both using Claude, right?
Yep.
And then I started using V0,
It
right? So
just
I was
came out. Just came
yeah.
out. Yep.
So I so first I was using it to make interfaces, and I was a little thrown off because I was like, okay, I got this good looking interface, but now I got to try to fold it into an existing code base. And the first attempt, it was like a mess because you didn't write the code, so now you're spending more time debugging than getting things done. But I um I figured out that V0 also has a regular chat Gen AI interface. So I started using that to write the code for the interface that it generated. So I was like I'm building a gift giver website, and I was able to build it. Granted, it took me 2 days, but I still tell people you have no idea. Like I just connected to Superbase. I took the UI, the component, Next Next.js, Tailwind. It was it was amazing, like what it was able to do.
Have you played with GPT Engineer? I know I mentioned
Well,
that.
you showed it to me last week, and
Yeah.
I love it. I like the structure of it, like it being project based, and I
It
love it.
builds real. Yeah.
Yeah,
The structure of it is amazing.
yep. And so I used it. I introduced it to someone else, but my thought was, let me finish using Claude and this, and then take it. I want to build the same thing in multiple things to kind of get a feel
Of
for it.
course, because that's how we operate.
Yeah, it's basically the new to-do list.com.
So, do you think software development is dead or what?
No, one, I had to still write code. I still had to know how to resolve issues. I still had to know how to read and analyze code. Now, I do think that we are changing from the creators of something to um, the chefs of something. Somebody, I heard this today. We are now taking recipes and cooking them up.
Oh, that's
Like,
accurate. I like that
yeah,
analogy. Yeah, because I was like, I was literally just going, all right, so now I know it can generate good UI. I know it can generate relatively good code. I can clean up the back end and the integration points. But my next thought is great. So, what is it that I want to do now?
oh, man, I have been getting crushed. So the good news, like for me, like this feeling, like waking up with this understanding that there are no more excuses,
None. No.
none.
And there are people who are like, oh, I really have this great app idea. I was like, tell it to GPT and let me know how it goes. Just don't like, and then when you get stuck, I know a real good mobile developer.
Yep, yep. And I think, well, let's say this: I had a great conversation with Claude. I knew what I wanted to ask. I knew what I was expecting. I knew how to set my expectations for a full CRUD, you know, full stack app. And then that comes from experience, right?
Right.
Can a layman person talk their way through an app? It's not impossible, but it's close to being possible.
No, it's true because the even with the GPT engineer, like, and it
Mm-hmm.
built everything and it was beautiful. And I literally npm install and npm run dev, and saying that to you means something. And saying that to a layman, they're like, oh wait, that's too complicated for me. And I will
Fighting
la-
through multiple versions of Node,
right.
having Node MVM, like I'll tell you that I was enjoying myself doing it after a long time of none of that being fun.
Right,
I just
exactly.
don't
No,
have
I remember like I spent weekends dealing with Webpack and going, what did I do? Oh, that spacing
it.
is wrong in that YAML file that's causing, oh, I forgot a colon one place, like that kind of those issues. And now I get to like worry about the build process. I was like, I don't have to worry about the build process. It'll fix it. Hey, this
Yep.
YAML file isn't working. What do I do? Yeah. But I think the next step in regards to what people are going to build all of these POCs, right? All
Yep.
these, they're going to call them MVPs. They're not, but they're going to
Yeah.
call them that. And they're going to have all this stuff running on their laptop. And they're like, this is amazing. Oh, how do I get it to an environment that I can show people? Aha.
Exactly.
And that DevOps stuff is yet,
Bro.
it's still not automated. Like, and I don't know, like the closest I mean, obviously Heroku's really good at it. Vercel is amazing at it.
Yep.
And that's
So
why
here's
when you
one
mentioned
I
Next.js, I
just
was like, that's kind of a game changer right there.
so here's one that I just paid for the whole year. Replit. Replit AI.
Yeah.
It will. So basically, it's you can do everything, and it will run it and host it in its own environment and give you access to it. So I was watching YouTube. It's like because I had been hosting some of the code that I was generating in Replit, but I didn't start there, and I hadn't thought about what would happen after the quick example code that I generated. But I watched him like produce a whole app in Replit and then put it in a container and put it to run in real time. And I
Right.
was
Well,
like, yeah,
and I think the container strategy is probably one of the greatest things that has happened in the past decade.
yeah,
I think maybe even longer than that. Because you can take, once you get it in a container, they're like, oh, well, I'd like to run it on AWS. Okay. Spin up a Kubernetes cluster and
there you
throw your
go.
content and you're done. Same thing with Google Cloud Platform, same thing with Azure. Once you have it containerized, then you can truly deploy it on any platform at any time. Throw a load balancer in front of it, and you have a live site.
Yeah, no, and again, we're getting further and further from the hands of normal everyday people. I mean, listen, you still go to a restaurant and have your food cooked, even though you can technically cook for yourself,
That's true.
right? Like food is still prepared for you.
You really
So
like the chef analogy. You're
no,
going deep on that.
it's yeah, it's the idea of the day, right? Like it's so no, I well one I like to cook, so the analogy works for me. So yeah,
No, it's true. And I think there's always going to be that area. There's going to be that gap. And it was, there's a, I'm going to get a little esoteric on you and spiritual, but there's a book called The Case for Christ. And it goes about of the proof of Christ being the Son of God and things like that. But what was really fascinating about it is even the guy who wrote the book, who started out as an atheist and ended up becoming a Christian, at the end of it, he's like, there's still a gap. And that gap is filled by faith in him. And then in regards to code, I really think that gap is filled by engineers like us.
yeah, no,
um,
that's
but there's always that gap. There will always be that gap. I don't care how well technology gets. There's going to be a oh, and then there's this one more step you have to do yourself. And the people that don't know that next step, they won't understand it.
I'll say two things. One that is just what I've seen over these years. Never discount how lazy people are.
That's fair.
You know, I like. And when I build WordPress sites, all you have to do is go in, edit a form, and put the. It's too much,
It's too
right?
much.
It's
Yeah.
too much. Right? Then the other thing that um, really has just kind of come up to me. Jesus, I think it just went like this. There was something really important related, but we were talking about
The the human aspect of we're gonna fill in the gap.
yes, and you know what, it went away.
It'll
It was something related to one how lazy people are in regards to things that they don't want to do, and then on the other side of that equation is there's there's just such we see the world in processes. We kind of talked about this a little bit last time, right? Like I came into it probably a little rough. I was like, there's a difference between self-taught. Well, I think you can argue that there's very little difference between self-taught developers and non-self-taught developers, but there are some signs, right? That if you have a traditional background or if you're self-taught, and where I was coming in is that traditional, I got a degree in computer science. It's not about the code. It's the way you see the world, the way your brain processes problems, you know. And again, I'll say the same thing that I argued last time. You get this argument again. People be like, "Oh, Steve Jobs. Everybody doesn't need to go to college. These people. Let me know when you drop out of Stanford. Then we can have this conversation."
right.
Unfortunately, I think that there are people who benefit by misinforming people about the power of education and higher education. And I'll pin that, and we can come back to it some other time. But where I'm going
I'll
with
take notes right now. I will save that for the next time.
the thing that's important is that when you do go to college, you spend your first year learning how to think. You Often when I talk to people, their eyes light up, and it's usually that first college course where you kind of get a crush on that first professor who just opens your eyes to everything. And it's usually like that first year, you're like, what? Wait, what? And then everything is kind of revealed to you, like the way you see the world, the way you process information, the way you process problems. Being being a developer, no matter how you got there, you are used to seeing the world as a series of problems. And that will always give you an advantage when it comes to writing code.
That's fair. No, I agree with that. Yeah,
I remember I
I was
remember the
thinking
thing.
of the professor. It's so funny when you said that what that one professor that you'll never forget kind of thing, and I was like, oh yeah, that was for me. It was this guy. His name's Dr. Nino. He was my computer science professor at University of New Orleans. But what was interesting about him is you're like, it happened like in your first year. I was like, yeah, it was kind of year three for me. But I also
Well, it was New Orleans.
I changed
It
majors
was
quite
New
a few
Orleans.
times. It is New Orleans. Come on. But yeah, by year three though, because he was the first one who actually failed me on a project, on a computer
Mm,
science project. And what was
mm,
fascinating about it is I was the only one in the class that had it
mm,
working.
mm,
But he knew, he was like, yeah, your code works, but your code is garbage. And he was
mm,
like, you're better than this. And he was the one who taught me to go, no, you need to actually have unit tests for what you're writing. You actually have to have documentation so it's maintainable code. He's like,
mm.
break things down. Like, and he taught me all of that in one project. And then I was like, I got so angry and I was like, all right, I'm going to win this. And the
I'm
next
gonna
one,
prove it to
obviously,
you. I'm
I
gonna prove
did.
it to
And
you.
he gave me, I got an A on everything else after that. But what was so fun is that first one, like other people got like B's and C's and he failed me intentionally because and I was like, but that code works. I can prove it. He's like, I know your code works, but your code is garbage. I was like, oh, but and it was. I
You can't argue that. The
so
other thing I was going to say that I think is very relevant is that I think we're going to see an arms race for prompt engineering, right?
it's a real thing, and I don't want it to be, but
but I think it already
it's
it
already
already
happening. No, for
already.
sure. And the other thing, it was when influencers started to be a real career. And I was
Hmm.
like, that's not a career as I sit here doing a podcast. Um,
Now we have to create a content.
I see.
Hey,
Hey, all right. I see the irony there. But no, prompt engineering is a real thing. And people are like, I actually had a meeting today and we were talking about some of the new techniques that you can use with Midjourney. And Midjourney now has a UI that you can actually do certain levels of interaction with and things like that. And I was like, oh, you have to get better and better with the tools. It's almost like a surgeon with a scalpel. Sure, anyone can cut somebody, but can you do it in such a precise way to get the right result and keep that person alive? I was like, no, I'm not a doctor, but I can write code that clean.
hmm
Yeah,
no, no.
that's prompt
What I'm
engineering. It's real.
what I'm starting to recognize is, excuse me, in the beginning it was like, oh, you just need to be very clear and methodical. Oh, you need to use modeling. Like there's all these like techniques, but now like I'm starting to see like in all the platforms that we're talking about, people are using whole files that say a good Next.js project looks like this.
Yes.
Like and it's they're like whole websites devoted to like what good prompts are. So we're that implies that we're going to have certain people be better than other people at getting results from through prompting, and it's going that's going to be a thing, you know.
There's a, I'll have to find it, but there is a GitHub repo I saw that has nothing but markdown files. And all it is a list of prompts for what you want to generate and the tool
Mm-hmm.
to use to generate it. And I was
Yep.
like, oh, that's interesting. And it's literally, there's people submitting to it all the time. I'm waiting for someone to just add that to some wiki somewhere and say, here's all the prompt answers that you're going to ever want.
Yeah. Let me
Hey,
let me
there's an
let me
idea.
yeah. Yes, right. But definitely let me get see that when you get a chance.
Yeah, I'll find it.
Yeah. No, I again, this kind of just kind of speaks to the nature of how things are changing, right? Um, I think personally, I was okay with not being the absolute best of the best, hands-on keyboard developer. I had a I was very fortunate in my earlier career to work with some really really good people. Like when I say good people, I mean good developers. They weren't actually good people. they like they just weren't very human. They were great developers. Um, and early on in my career, I made a decision that if I was comfortable with not being the best, if it meant that I could be a well-rounded individual.
Yeah, I had some, like I had a couple managers in my career that were not only amazing developers, but they were actually really good people. And they had such an impact on like what you were talking about earlier of the way I learn. And
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
one of my managers, name's Chad, he actually taught me how to learn a new framework. And I'll never forget. There's a game you would actually remember this. There's a game back in the
Mm-hmm.
day on the Commodore 64 called Load Runner. Um,
Yep.
okay,
Yep.
well he created that. Not that game, but he created a version of it in dynamic HTML when that was a thing, and he did it strictly for the purpose to learn that entire programming language. And he
Wow.
learned JavaScript and HTML and DHTML all like, and he's like, yeah, what I would do is go through it alphabetically, every function method and attribute in it, and I would see what it would do. And I would add that to my code and see if I could use it anywhere in the code. And he created that, and then he created a level builder, and this was all on the web, and this was in 1999. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's hardcore.
yeah,
I
it was
so
amazing.
I have one of those. His name is Dan, and I'll see your load runner and I'll give you sewer shark. It's
Oh
that
wow.
very he's currently I think he's finished, but he ported it to another platform. This like 20 plus, almost 30 years old.
Right.
And again, it's just a matter of how they see the world. They just like he can crack something open, look at its innards, and go, okay, now I understand. Let's go, and just go.
No,
You know.
absolutely. It's really fascinating to watch people solve problems when they're that good at it. And
Hmm.
I just like I kind of like to sit back and watch, and I was like, here's the problem. What would you do? Well, I could do this, this, and this, but those first two are actually not good solutions, and here's why. But I would do this solution. And like in 10 minutes, he has a perfect, well rounded solution. And I was like, oh, that's, and that is why
some of
you're my manager.
it's like some of the best sessions that I've had recently, especially in the last year, has just been like sitting over his shoulder. You know, he's doing something either for me or with me, and I wouldn't even call it rubber ducking. Maybe it's rubber ducking a little because I have something to offer, but just kind of watching him like go and and then just being in a safe environment to be able to go like, oh, I have no idea what you just did there. You're gonna have to explain that to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think that's why I have been in technology as long as I have is as soon as you think you've actually mastered something, there's like 1,000 more things that you need to even at least know about. Never mind master them because you won't. And I think that's something that I have kind of been okay with. Because can I do CSS? Yes. Am I a front end expert? Mm, no. Can I do back end? Of course. Am I
So
a
I,
back end expert? Eh,
I just
right.
think that the acceptance that you're like being okay with not knowing everything, you know, again, coming from a consulting background, every time you open your mouth, it's in the service of a customer. Basically, someone's paying you to have the right answer. And I used to carry that heavy expectation of myself all the time. One, it made me insufferable because no one wants you to have the right answer. They want to be led to the right answer. They don't want you to have the right answer.
Right.
Yeah. So two, it's exhausting. The expectation that you have to know everything.
And
And
it is exhausting and it's a lot to demand of anybody. But
mhm,
one of the things I have learned in because yeah, I did SAP consulting for a brief time, and I would walk in the room and I knew at that for that specific area, I was the smartest person in the room for that area. And
mhm,
the answers were easy because it was it was XML is basically what I was doing, and it was the ABAP programming language, and I was really good at it at the time. And it was really fascinating because I could walk in a room and be that confident in that area, and then I would go home and do web and HTML and that stuff and JavaScript just because I loved it. And I was like, wow, there's so much I still have to learn. There is nothing more that I need to learn about ABAP because I don't think that language has changed in the past 30 years.
yep.
Um,
It's so
but
funny
it's
how
like
one.
COBOL developers, right? They're the
Yeah.
best in the
Yeah.
world at what they do.
Mhm.
And it's okay to
Mm.
be a master at something, but you will
Yeah.
not be a master of everything. And if you think that you can learn that, stop.
I can just speak for myself. My my work life, everything got better once I accepted that it's okay not to know everything. Like once I took that expectation off, it left me so much more room to grow. I
I can only
I
imagine.
yeah. I tell like I interview and mentor a lot of people, and I say this to them all the time. I don't know is a superpower because it gives you an opportunity to set a true north. Like if it's worth it to you to learn this thing, you can set course to that north, and then you can go in that direction. It completely stops the jackals in their tracks. We are surrounded by people who feel like they have to test us at any given moment. Like we can walk into a room and someone's gonna jump out, wow, what's the answer to this? It's it's quite
Yeah.
and not to mix chocolate and peanut butter, but if you haven't noticed, I'm black. And sometimes there's people who just don't accept that you belong in X. You don't belong in movies or technology or whatever. So there's always some piece of somebody's trying to challenge you for whatever reason. Like you
Right.
can't really be, this good at what you propose you are, and they're going to challenge you. So being comfortable just saying, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but if you give me a minute, I'll get it for you.
Right. And I think that's an okay answer. And a lot of people uh, forget that.
Yes, especially the newbies because they just I don't know. I think we have done a terrible job of setting the framework for newbies. Personally, I just
No,
you know
and I think especially in when they come into a startup land,
yeah
and when they come into the startup, you have to wear at least five hats. Just
yeah
accept that. And there's people that are coming out of boot camps and coming out of colleges, and they're like, "Oh, I want to work at a startup." And let me give this valid piece of advice in my mind is don't start at a startup
yeah
unless you're founding it and it's like your dream to build whatever you're about to build. Don't start there. Start at a corporation, get yourself surrounded by some really smart engineers that have
hmm
been around and will teach you the things that you need to learn, and by and then absolutely go to the startup.
yeah
And because I came out of college and I was at a startup, and I worked 90 hours a week. I mean, I wish I was exaggerating, but I don't think that is a lie. And then I went to Georgia Power. Actually, I was that was my first time in Atlanta, and
mm
I moved and I worked at Georgia Power, and I was surrounded by like corporations of SQL engineer, database administrators, and they were like, oh, this is easy for us. We do this. We've been doing this for 20 years, and we know SQL really really well.
hmm
And I went from there to Microsoft, and obviously at Microsoft I got surrounded by crazy smart people. And after Microsoft though, I pretty much just was like, all right, let's see what the startup world is. And
hmm
it's been it's been a whirlwind. It's been a whirlwind. But
yeah
if I didn't have that foundation and I guess that level of confidence, because those corporations really build my confidence of I am capable, I'm good enough, I can actually solve problems, and it's okay to break things. And
hmm
I think that's one of the big things for newbies to realize. And it's really on the manager more than the new hire, because I think managers are expecting the new hire to come in as a rock star and be all that, but they're the back of their mind they know that you're going to learn things. But I think what's really important for them is to set them up that it is okay to fail and break things and then fix it.
yeah.
um, and
That's
you got to give them that room. If you don't give them that room, then they're going to be coding in fear the entire time and looking for their next job.
yeah. One, I think we talked about newbies and boot campers. I think one of the biggest challenges is that organizations want new talent, but they're not built for new talent. They don't have
They don't
a
have the support staff. You're right.
yeah, they don't have an apparatus that can grow talent. I saw someone post on LinkedIn today. Basically, he has an agency that does recruiting, and he was saying that this FANG level resource was getting 300K remotely. He's in Houston. That's a lot of money in Houston. And he said, how can a local company compete? And, you know, the I was going to reply, but I kind of held back my reply. But the answer is simple. You're not competing based on money. There's many different as aspects to hiring an employee. And my first thought about that is if you invest in an employee early, there's like a transference of trust, and they will stay with you for as long as it's viable, right? Like I know that us grizzled, hardcore, mercenaries, yeah, we're chasing the money, right? Like, sorry, you're $100,000 short, but newbies have some level of loyalty, but you have to treat them right. Like you could just treat people well. right? Not everybody needs, 400 or 500 grand a year. Some people just need a job where they're respected and heard and valued.
And
And
get to learn new things and play with new
exactly.
things. Yeah, and I think that learning is so valuable, especially to engineers, because
Yeah.
that's why we do what we do. Like
Hmm.
10% of what we do is coding, and 90% of it is debugging, and that's reality.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely right. So, you know, one, I wish that these, I think the problem has exasperated because of this downward slip that I would call it, that, we're currently experiencing tech and tech hiring. You know, they companies don't feel like they need to do anything to make the experience better because you're getting 1,000 people applying to a single role,
It's
right?
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
But
actually we have an open role right now at my company, and it is, I think it was like 500 or 600 applicants in day one. In
day
day
one,
one. Yeah.
day one, before, people would literally beg you to apply to their roles.
Yeah.
But here's the lesson if people are paying attention. This is not going to last. Like, everything is a circle. Like, people are going to start realizing that they can't do everything with just AI or whatever crazy ideas they had. They still need people. And the Fed cut the rate, right?
Yeah.
Immediately shot up the market, which introduces new cash, and a lot of those people who were like kind of tepid to hire, they're gonna release, the strings, you know. So eventually, the market will reach some normalcy, and you will go back to struggling to find good talent. The lesson should be now, you should be investing in talent now, because not because you don't have choice, is because you do have choice.
Right. No, and I think that's really important is you do have the the big pool right now. So great, get somebody now and then create that loyalty and treat them with respect and help them get better, um, and get them in that door. And I think you're right, because what's gonna happen is it's gonna be another scarcity like it was in, I guess it was almost, I guess 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago now.
12 years, I think it's like a 12-year run.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, 10, yeah, 12-year run. So we're coming up the, wow, I guess it's time for it to go back to that soon.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, it's, we're almost at that hour mark. I know
Mm-hmm.
it's, and I just want to one, thank you so much for doing this. This has been so much fun. I've
Yeah, I
just
love it.
for those who don't know, I have known Shawn for, honestly, it's been what, almost like 10 years now.
Yeah, yeah, 2015.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um and just, he lives in Atlanta, I live in New York, and we still chat from time to time. And just thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Hopefully this will be a regular thing. We will.
No, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
This is, I'm really excited about this. And yeah, I guess that's it. And I'll do my little thank you and everything else. But thanks everybody for tuning in, and hope to see you next week. Have a good one.
Yeah, there we go.